nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman, do we count Commissioner Beer's comments as part of our public comment period then?
I forgot to ask for public comment. Is there anybody who wants to give public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward with the consent agenda. Approve the May 3rd County Board minutes. Proclaim May as Active People Healthy Nation Month. Approve 2023 State Aid Construction Funds Advancement. Accept Minnesota Department of Health's Public Health Infrastructure Grant. Approve temporary on-sale liquor license for Viola Gopher Count Incorporated. Approve new master partnership contract with MnDOT. Accept COVID-19 mini grant for CREST Mobile Crisis Program. Accept the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Continuum of Care grant.
Move approval.
All in favor, say aye.
Chair.
Whoa. Sorry.
Chair, I just want to call out that our Public Health Department's infrastructure grant, I believe, is the largest one that was awarded, and it was put together in such a way that the department actually came back and offered to expand the grant from what originally proposed. Very unusual, and very much a reflection of the work that our Public Health Department has done and the high regard with which it's held, and that we are now in a position with that grant to be able to really be a leader for the state in a very critical issue of data analytics and epidemiology infrastructure for public health. So I just didn't want this to go by as just a consent agenda item, because it's a very significant accomplishment by a department who has been under a lot of duress for the last year, fighting COVID, and have come out of it learning and leading. And I just wanted to say congratulations.
And they came back and offered us more money?
Yes,
Historic.
that is historic.
The state of Minnesota we're talking
It
about.
can't be.
All right, that's noted. We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thank you.
Holy smokes.
Well done. All right, regular agenda, discussion decision items. Approve ARPA fund decisions.
Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. Wilfredo Roman Catalan, Olmsted County Chief Financial Officer. I have a few items here to review with you with regards to the American Rescue Plan Act, specifically our local fiscal recovery fund. So let me start with a few things here. The eligibility of the funds. Number one, one of the purposes of the fund needs to help us respond and mitigate the health emergency or its negative economic impacts. Number two, which is the one that we're going to cover in more detail in the successive slides here, is to provide government services to the extent of reduction in revenue, and I'll explain what that means. Make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, and finally, provide premium pay for eligible workers. So those are the four main criteria used by the U.S. Treasury Department. So just in summary, we got about $30.7 million allocated to Olmsted County. First half of that, or about $15.3 million, was received in May of last year, 2021. And anytime, either in May or in June, we should be receiving the second half of the same amount, $15.3 million. Last year, you have approved a number of initiatives that were made possible by the ARPA funding, and I listed those here not in order of importance, but in order of the amounts. As you can see, the first item listed is a very significant portion of the funding going to affordable and transitional housing, as well as emergency shelters of about $16.1 million. Another $1.2 million to the Oxbow Nature Center, $1 million to leverage technology and improve services in our Human Services Department, $420,000 for workforce training programs, and we have a contract with the Workforce Development to deliver those services. $500,000 for a failing sewer system that serves vulnerable population. This is what the Chester Heights sewer system. We also have about 620,000 for personal costs within the attorney's office in other areas of the county, and then about 170,000 for other services to vulnerable populations. So previously, you have approved about 20 million related to this funding. Now, today we're asking for you to approve a second round, if you will, of new initiatives, and those are listed here in front of you. The most significant item on the list is the Groundwater Protection and Soil Health Initiative. We're trying to adopt or help incentivize the adoption of soil health practices within the county to help us reduce nitrate leaching into the groundwater. So that's a very significant investment. Following that, we have about $420,000 contribution to a second failing sewer system. This one is the Summer Ridge State system that is also serve vulnerable populations. Third, $500,000 for childcare, the CLEAF program pilot. And basically what that is, for those probably listening at home, is sometimes the programs that are put together by the state have some criteria that a certain amount of money the family is making then drastically benefits the individual families are receiving for childcare services drop significantly. Therefore, this is incentivizing individuals to move and continue to earn more money. So we're trying to develop a pilot program to address that and help continue the progression out of the system by helping families that way. $300,000 for a new FTE related to schools, attendance, mental health related services, dealing with truancy. We have another one of $265,000 also related to the same concept. This is a continuation of an FTE that was approved last year. And we have $232,000 of mental health services stabilization, another new full-time equivalent for the county. As you can see, these numbers fluctuate. Some of these may generate a certain amount of revenue outside of the ARPA funding. Some may not. Some may be, depending on the date the position will start. The position needs certain type of equipment, things like that. That's why you see some differences in numbers here. And obviously, these are all budget numbers, so eventually all of them will be not right because actual numbers will be correct. But this is a fairly good estimate of what those numbers represent. And then finally here we have about $125,000 with Family Service of Rochester expanding a program to have more therapy time for kids, for children. So in total, those are about $4.8 million in new initiatives with ARP made available with ARPA funding.
Wilfredo,
Yes.
the school attendance, is that for two? It must be two. Was it?
Remember, this is for about 2.5 years worth of budget. So it's one, right? One of these lines represent one FTE.
But it's for
2.5 years or so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions? Let me stop here for a second before I continue.
So are all of these a 2.5 year period?
About, like I said, some may have a different start date. Some may generate a certain amount of revenue. Some, because the continuation one doesn't need extra equipment that already was purchased a year ago. That's why the numbers are kind of different.
So for instance, the contract for more therapy time, that's also a 2-year
Yep.
projection? Okay.
How about that childcare benefit cliff pilot? How long is that pilot program?
That's an excellent question that I honestly don't know the answer, so I'm going to call a friend. Travis.
Call a friend. Call a friend.
Yeah, we are still working out the framework for that, so it really depends upon when it gets launched. But I would anticipate that that'll extend a little bit beyond this, kind of the 2-year target we've been talking about. Back to Commissioner Cascaden's question, those other FTEs that we budgeted for was through December of 2024. Okay, so the remainder of this year, all of 23 and all of 24. Okay. The pilot may extend a little bit beyond that, depending upon when we actually make it operational.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Travis. Okay, So just to give you perspective, like I said at the beginning, we were allocated about 30.7 million from the U.S. Treasury. Between the allocation from 2021 of 20 million and the one from today, 4.8, we're about 24.8 million allocated, close to 80% of the total, 80% of the total funds allocated by the U.S. Treasury, leaving around $5.8 million of unallocated funds for future decisions. As you remember on the second slide, I mentioned these government services and revenue reduction or revenue loss. The U.S. Treasury came with this very interesting formula, how to make that calculation. And basically what they did was they said, well, for the previous 3 years before the pandemic, let's get an average of your revenues excluding federal funds. And then we're going to apply that growth percentage, if you will. In our case, was about 5.4 average growth of revenues per year. And they say, well, we're going to call that the counterfactual trend. So we will assume that your revenues continue to increase at the same rate. And then your actual revenues will be compared to that. And the difference, we're going to call it a loss. It doesn't mean that we actually lost compared to our normal budget operation, that the revenues were lower than expenses. That's not the same definition. But that's how it came out to be. We're going to use that formula prescribed by the U.S. Treasury. We always have to wait until the year has ended. For example, we waited until 2020 in order to apply those dollars into 2021. But the important thing here, and I'll cover those details later, but the important here about this revenue reduction is the most flexible amount of funds we can use. The federal government has said you can use these revenue loss calculation or loss dollars to fund anything that you normally use or do for providing services in the county, except for, and they listed paying for debt or just put it in a savings account and don't use it. They just want us to activate the economy by spending the money with that regard. Also, they have said, well, especially if you use it for salaries and benefits, the reporting required for these dollars under this revenue loss calculation is going to be very simple. Also, for audit purposes, is very simple. So one of the things we're going to be doing as an organization, we did already with the 2020 revenue loss calculation in 2021, is use these dollars to pay for salaries and benefits. Then the levies that were set aside to pay for those, we're going to then use those to activate in all these initiatives that you have put together moving forward. The wonderful thing about doing it that way is that now you eliminate that deadline of December 31st, 2024, because you're consuming the dollars fairly quickly. It allows you to expand. Let's say that we need to go a year after 2024, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It doesn't matter now because we have done this technique approved by the U.S. Treasury. It's not that we're doing something that is not appropriate.
You don't see those rules changing again, Wilfredo, you think?
No, they already issued their final rule. So under the final rule, these are the prescribed mechanisms that we can use to make things happen. So we don't anticipate any more changes. Yep. The other component is as we're consuming the dollars fairly quickly, then potentially what could have happened is sometimes they have those clawback clauses that they can come back and get the money out of under us, right? Since we have consumed the funds already, then that doesn't apply anymore. So that's another advantage of doing what we're doing.
Yeah, well, as long as they're the final rules.
Yes.
Around.
Yep. Yeah.
About 8 iterations.
Yeah, they have very number of iterations in the interim final rule, but now it's the final rule. So finally, here's just a very high level how this works. If you see the very first line item, based on the 2020 year end audited financials, that's the other important part here. Our counterfactual revenue was about 243 million. Our actual revenue, excluding federal funds and under the formula, like I mentioned, it was about 235.6 million. That left us with a revenue loss of 7.8, which we claim in 2021 and used to pay salaries and benefits. Now, for the year end 2021, the same calculation formula, now we show a 17.4 million revenue loss, and those dollars will be used now in this current calendar year, year end 2022. So those two calculations that we've done so far accumulate to about 25.2 million, or about 82% of the ARPA funds. So in 2022, when 22 is done, we'll do the same calculation again, and hopefully we can capture the remainder 5.8 million under this rule. Questions about that? I know that formula is kind of weird, but it's the way it was being prescribed by the U.S. Treasury. We have no control, and actually we welcome it. So how much of the dollars have we actually used? So out of the 30.7 million, if we include expenses and salaries through March of 31st of this year, 2022, then we have used about 13.9 million, or about 45% of the funds, leaving $16.7 unspent. And finally, here's a request to the board is number one, and this is a very important critical one, is approved. We maximize the revenue reduction loss category, just that process that I explained to you, and how we can then maximize those dollars and use the free up levy to actually do the initiatives. By first consuming paying for salaries and benefits already budgeted for with ARPA, and then the free up levy will be used to pay for the initiatives. And second is to approve those initiatives listed previously that total the $4.8 million. Any questions, remarks? Okay.
Thank you.
Good. My pleasure.
It's just a mystery how the federal government coded.
We need to act on this, so no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the new ARPA initiatives as listed by the Finance Department.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you. All right.
Commissioner, just make sure the first request was to use the revenue loss calculation to pay for salaries and benefits, and use then the free up levy to do the initiative. So that's
All right, so I
important.
need a second motion for the second part of the recommendations.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Okay. We are to board and committee reports. Matt, can we start with you?
I really don't have nothing much.
Okay. Sheila?
No, Mr. Chair.
What?
Put that in the minutes.
Wow. You give me a moment, I will think of something.
You have shocked us. Yeah.
All right.
What'd you do with Sheila?
Or something I can sniff.
Greg?
No report.
Stephanie?
No.
No,
What?
I'm not gonna break the chain.
Pretty good.
All right, well, I got a quote, but would you like to speak before the quote? Or? Last meeting, I didn't give a quote, and somebody actually noticed. So that,
I
so
did.
maybe-
I did.
Yeah, so I got a quote. So, knowing that today is the first day of filing for local elected office, my quote is from Martin Luther King, given 65 years ago in a speech in Montgomery, Alabama. And he said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" That's my quote.
What are you doing for others?
Move approved. Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Holy moly, Roger. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I did pretty well.